As Sarah stood at the altar, heart pounding and eyes locked on the man she was about to marry, she had no idea that in the next few moments, her entire world would be turned upside down by a secret so shocking, it would leave everyone in the church gasping. What would you do if the love of your life had been hiding a truth that could change everything? Keep watching to find out. And before we dive into this unforgettable moment, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from viewers all around the world. Sarah always believed that love was supposed to find you when you least expected it. She was a kind-hearted, warm woman with a deep sense of love and empathy. Sarah had always been the type of person who cared for others, always ready to lend a helping hand, and her friends often teased her about her too big heart. But in all her kindness, love for herself had never quite knocked on her door. That was until she met James. It happened one evening at a community event. Sarah had been helping out at a charity fundraiser when she first saw him. He was sitting quietly in a corner, watching the crowd with gentle eyes, a small smile playing on his lips. What caught her attention wasn't his wheelchair, but the calmness in his presence. There was something about him that made her curious, made her feel like she wanted to know more. As the event went on, Sarah found herself glancing in his direction more than a few times. And then, as if fate had decided to step in, James rolled his wheelchair toward her during a quiet moment. "Hi," he said, his voice soft yet confident. "You seem like the heart of this place. I've seen you running around helping everyone." Sarah blushed slightly, caught off guard by his observation. "I just like helping," she replied with a shy smile. "It's kind of my thing." James chuckled. "Well, the world could use more people like you." The conversation flowed naturally after that. They talked about everything, from the event to their hobbies, and then about life itself. Sarah quickly learned that James wasn't just humble and quiet. He was smart, funny, and deeply caring. Despite his disability, there was a spark in him that drew her in. But as the evening ended and James gave her his phone number, Sarah hesitated. Over the next few days, Sarah found herself thinking about James a lot. There was something about him that made her heart feel warm, something that made her smile. But there was also a part of her that couldn't ignore the fact that he was in a wheelchair. She had never thought about dating someone who was disabled before, and the thought brought mixed emotions. Would it be difficult? Could she handle it? These questions circled in her mind, making her uncertain. Despite her doubts, Sarah decided to text James. She couldn't deny the connection she had felt with him. His reply came quickly, and before long, they had planned their first official date. Sarah was nervous, unsure of how it would go. Would it be awkward? Would people stare? But the moment James greeted her at the cafe with his warm smile, all her worries melted away. They talked for hours that day, sharing stories and laughter. James didn't make her feel like she was talking to a disabled person. He made her feel like she was talking to someone she could fall in love with. And that's exactly what started to happen. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Sarah soon realized that James's disability was not something that defined him. In fact, it was something she rarely even thought about when they were together. What mattered most was how he made her feel. He was gentle, always listening to her with full attention, and he made her laugh in a way no one else had before. Sarah had never felt this way about anyone. But as their relationship deepened, Sarah couldn't help but feel a tiny seed of doubt growing inside her. While she was falling in love with James, she couldn't shake the thought of how different their life together might be because of his disability. Would it be challenging? Would people judge them? Could she handle the extra care he might need in the future? One evening, as they sat by the park watching the sunset, Sarah decided to voice her concerns. "James," she began softly, I really care about you, but sometimes I worry. I've never been in a relationship like this before." James turned to her, his eyes soft and understanding. "You mean because I'm in a wheelchair?" he asked, without a hint of bitterness. Sarah nodded, feeling guilty for even bringing it up. James reached out and took her hand. "I get it," he said gently. "It's not something everyone is used to. But Sarah, I don't want you to love me in spite of this chair. I want you to love me for who I am, with or without it." His words made Sarah's heart swell with emotion. In that moment, she realized how much she truly loved him. Not because he was different, but because he was James. He was the man who made her laugh, the man who listened, the man who saw her for who she was. His disability wasn't something that defined him. It was just a part of him, like the color of his eyes or the sound of his voice. The doubts in Sarah's mind slowly faded after that conversation. Their love grew deeper, and before she knew it, James was on one knee, proposing to her in the very same park where they had shared their heart-to-heart. Sarah said yes, tears in her eyes and joy in her heart. It didn't matter anymore that James used a wheelchair. What mattered was that he was the love of her life, the man she wanted to spend forever with. The journey had been unexpected, but Sarah had found the kind of love she had always dreamed of. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't without challenges, but it was real, and it was theirs. Sarah was over the moon. She had said yes to the love of her life, James, and now they were preparing for the most important day of their lives, their wedding. She couldn't wait to walk down the aisle and say her vows, promising to spend forever with him. As she began to make plans, picking out her dress, choosing the venue, and talking to florists, everything felt like a dream come true. But not everyone shared her excitement. At first, Sarah's family and friends had been supportive, admiring her selflessness and kind heart. They all knew how much she cared about James, how he made her happy. But as the reality of the wedding approached, quiet whispers of doubt began to spread. People started to wonder aloud if Sarah was making the right choice. One evening, as Sarah sat at her parents' house, her mom looked at her with concern in her eyes. "Sweetheart, are you really sure about this?" she asked gently, sipping her tea. Sarah frowned, feeling the familiar knot in her stomach. "Mom, what do you mean? I love James. Of course I'm sure." Her mom sighed, placing the cup down. "I know you love him, Sarah, but marriage is a big commitment, and marrying someone with a disability, well, it's not going to be easy. You have to think about what your life will be like down the road." Sarah felt her heart sink. She had heard similar comments from a few friends lately, but hearing it from her mother felt different. "Mom, James being in a wheelchair doesn't change who he is. He's still the same person I fell in love with. Why does everyone act like this is such a big deal?" Her mother's face softened. "It's not just the wheelchair, honey. It's everything that comes with it. Are you ready for that kind of responsibility? What if his condition gets worse? What if you have to care for him in ways you didn't expect? I just don't want you to feel trapped." Later that night, Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mom's words echoing in her mind. She had always known that being with James might come with challenges, but she had never let herself focus on them. Now, with her wedding just weeks away, doubts she didn't want to acknowledge began to creep in. What if Mom's right? She whispered to herself. What if things get hard? What if I'm not strong enough? The thought of life with James had always filled her with joy, but now, the weight of everyone's doubts felt like a shadow hanging over her. Could love really be enough to carry them through whatever obstacles might come? As the days went on, Sarah tried to shake off her worries. She threw herself into wedding planning, focusing on the excitement and joy of the upcoming day. But it wasn't just her family who had doubts. One afternoon, while Sarah was at lunch with her best friends, one of them, Lisa, leaned in and asked the question that had been on everyone's mind. "Sarah, we love you, and we love James. But are you sure you're happy with this? Like, really happy?" Sarah looked up from her sandwich, surprised by the sudden shift in conversation. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice slightly defensive. Lisa hesitated, exchanging glances with the other friends at the table. "It's just, we worry about you. You're always so giving, always putting others first. We just want to make sure you're doing this because you really want to, not because you feel like you have to." Sarah put her sandwich down, her appetite gone. "Of course I want to," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "James makes me happy. Isn't that what matters?" Another friend, Jessica, chimed in. "Of course it is. But Sarah, this is your whole life we're talking about. What happens when things get tough? Have you really thought about what that might look like?" That night, Sarah sat alone in her living room, staring at the small collection of wedding invitations she had yet to send out. Everyone seemed to think she was making some sort of sacrifice, like marrying James was an act of selflessness, not love. But that's not how she saw it. Yes, James had a disability, but he wasn't defined by it. He was funny, loving, and smart. He listened to her when she needed to talk, and he always knew how to make her laugh, even on her worst days. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking back to all the moments they had shared together. The way he had held her hand in the park when she had opened up about her fears. The way he had smiled at her during their long conversations. She had fallen in love with James for who he was, not for what others saw. Suddenly, Sarah felt a surge of determination. She wasn't going to let anyone's doubts shake her belief in her love for James. Yes, there would be challenges, but weren't there challenges in every marriage? Life was unpredictable for everyone, not just for those with disabilities. What mattered was that she loved James with all her heart, and he loved her just as much. They were partners in every sense of the word. It was the wedding day, and Sarah sat at her vanity, staring at her reflection. Her heart was racing, a jumble of excitement and nerves. Her wedding dress hung on the back of the door, a vision of white lace and delicate beading. It was the perfect dress, the one she had dreamed of. But as Sarah gazed into the mirror, her thoughts were far from the fabric of the dress or the flowers waiting at the church. Instead, her mind was filled with the overwhelming reality that soon she would be walking down the aisle toward James. "Sarah, are you ready?" her friend Lisa called from the other room. Lisa had been with her since early that morning, helping her get dressed and doing her hair. She had been a rock throughout all the preparations, despite her earlier doubts. "I think so," Sarah replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned to look at her dress once more, her fingers trembling as they touched the lace. She was ready, she told herself, but the nerves were undeniable. As Lisa helped her into the dress, Sarah's mind wandered to the church. She knew it would be packed with family, friends, and guests. Some had been supportive from the start, excited to see Sarah so happy. But she also knew there were others who still doubted. People who would sit in the pews, whispering about whether she was making the right choice, questioning if she could truly be happy with a man like James. But Sarah pushed those thoughts away. Today wasn't about them. Today was about her and James. Today was about love. Her heart pounded as she adjusted her veil, the sheer fabric falling lightly over her face. The weight of the moment hit her all at once. This is real. I'm getting married. A mix of nervousness and joy bubbled up inside her. She glanced at herself in the mirror one last time, seeing not just a bride, but a woman who had found love, despite the odds. Meanwhile, at the church, the guests were slowly filling the pews. There was a buzz of excitement in the air. Some guests had never met James before and were curious to see the man who had won Sarah's heart. Others, who had known him for years, admired the strength of their relationship, but a few couldn't help but wonder how it would all work out in the long run. "I just hope she knows what she's doing," one of Sarah's distant cousins whispered to her seatmate. "I heard he's a good man," the seatmate replied. "Maybe that's all that matters." Despite the chatter and the whispers, there was an undeniable sense of anticipation as everyone waited for the ceremony to begin. James, on the other hand, was calm. As calm as anyone could be on their wedding day. Sitting in his wheelchair at the front of the church, he seemed relaxed, even serene. His suit was perfectly tailored, and his eyes were bright with quiet excitement. Unlike Sarah, he didn't feel the need to fuss over details or worry about what people thought. Today was about him and the woman he loved. That's all that mattered. He had been through enough in his life to know that doubt and uncertainty would always be present. But he also knew, deep down, that Sarah loved him just as much as he loved her. And that was enough to keep him grounded, even with the weight of this monumental day upon them. As he waited, James could hear the murmurs of the crowd, some of them supportive, others curious or even skeptical. He caught the occasional glance or sideways look, but he had long learned to ignore such things. Today wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about committing to the woman who had shown him love in a way no one else ever had. Back at the bride's room, Sarah took a deep breath as her father entered to walk her down the aisle. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, his eyes misty with emotion. Sarah smiled, but the nervousness hadn't left her. "Dad, do you think I'm making the right choice?" she asked softly, her voice shaking. Her father paused, looking at her thoughtfully. "Sarah, I'll be honest. At first, I wasn't sure. I had my doubts, like others. But I see the way James looks at you, and I see the way you look at him. That's all I need to know." Sarah's heart lifted at his words. She nodded, squeezing her father's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling the tears welling up behind her eyes. "I love him so much." "I know you do," he replied, his voice full of warmth. The music began to play, signaling that it was time. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped out of the room and made her way toward the aisle. She clung to her father's arm as they entered the church, the soft murmur of the guests rising as everyone turned to see her. The moment felt like a blur. The aisle seemed longer than she had ever imagined. Her legs trembled slightly as she walked, but as soon as her eyes met James's, everything else melted away. He was waiting for her at the end of the aisle, just as calm and collected as always, his eyes filled with nothing but love. Sarah's heart was racing as she stood at the altar, her hand clasped in James's. The world seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them, surrounded by love and anticipation. The moment she had dreamed of was finally here. Her father had walked her down the aisle. The guests had smiled, some with tear-filled eyes, and the air was heavy with emotion. Everything was perfect. But as she gazed into James's eyes, something felt different. There was a flicker of hesitation behind his calm exterior, a subtle shift that made her stomach twist with unease. It was a look she hadn't seen before, and it unsettled her. The priest began to speak, but Sarah's focus wavered as she watched James closely. He seemed distant, like he was wrestling with something in his mind. Before she could ask if he was okay, James squeezed her hand gently, signaling that something was coming. She could feel his fingers trembling slightly against hers. And then, just as the priest prepared to start the vows, James took a deep breath and looked into her eyes. "Sarah, wait," he said, his voice breaking the silence that had fallen over the church. The crowd murmured softly, confused by the interruption. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, her mind racing with uncertainty. "What's going on?" she thought. She felt a knot forming in her chest, her nerves suddenly on edge. James swallowed hard, his eyes locked on hers, filled with a mix of guilt and determination. "Before we go any further," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "James, what are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, fear creeping into her words. He hesitated for a moment, glancing at the crowd behind them, then back at her. I'm not who you think I am," he said softly, his voice filled with regret. "I'm not really disabled." The words hit Sarah like a bolt of lightning. Her knees weakened, and her mind went blank, unable to process what she had just heard. What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The room seemed to grow quieter, as if the air had been sucked out of it entirely. James's eyes were pleading now, desperate for her to understand. "I'm not really disabled," he repeated, his voice firmer this time. "I've been pretending." The gasps from the crowd echoed through the church like ripples in a pond. Everyone was frozen in disbelief, their eyes wide with shock. Sarah could feel all the eyes on her, but at that moment, she didn't care. All she could focus on was James, the man she had fallen in love with, the man she thought she knew. Her head spun as she struggled to understand. Why? Why would you do that? She asked, her voice shaking. James took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving hers. I needed to know if someone could love me for me, he said slowly. Not for my looks, not for my money, not for anything else. I wanted to find someone who could see past all of that, who could love me for who I really am. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. You lied to me, she whispered, the hurt clear in her voice. All this time, you were lying. James's face crumpled with guilt. I didn't mean to hurt you, Sarah. I just didn't know how else to find real love. I've seen so many people use me for what I have, for the life I can give them. But I wanted to know if someone could love me without any of that. He looked down, ashamed. When we first met, I saw how kind you were, how selfless. I wanted to see if you could love me for who I am, without knowing about my wealth or my ability to walk. The church was silent now, every guest hanging on James's every word. Sarah's mind was spinning, her heart torn between disbelief and the love she still felt for him. The man she loved had been lying to her from the very beginning, pretending to be someone he wasn't. And yet, she had fallen in love with the person underneath all of that. You should have trusted me, Sarah said, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face. You should have told me the truth from the start. I loved you, James. I loved you for you, not for your wheelchair. But now I don't even know what's real. James reached out to take her hands again, his eyes filled with remorse. Sarah, I know I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. But I swear to you, the man you fell in love with, that's the real me. The wheelchair didn't change who I am inside. I needed to know that your love was real. Sarah pulled her hands away, stepping back, her mind reeling. She felt like the ground was crumbling beneath her. How could the man she had trusted so deeply betray her like this? The whispers from the crowd grew louder now, the guests unsure of what to think. Some were outraged, while others seemed to be trying to make sense of it all. Sarah, James said again, his voice desperate. I love you. Everything else was a lie, but my love for you, that was real. She looked into his eyes, searching for the truth. Her heart was shattered, torn between the man she loved and the lie he had created. The silence between them felt unbearable. Finally, Sarah took a deep breath, her voice quiet but firm. James, she said softly, I need time. I need to think. Sarah hurried down the aisle, her heart racing and tears streaming down her face. She felt like she was drowning in confusion and pain. The man she thought she knew, the man she loved, had deceived her in a way she never imagined. She had given him her heart, trusted him completely, and yet he had built their relationship on a lie. Her hands trembled as she reached a small room at the back of the church, shutting the door behind her. She leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, her chest heavy with emotion. Sarah tried to make sense of it all, but her thoughts were a tangled mess. How could James do this? How could he pretend to be someone he wasn't? She had loved him for who he was, not because of his wheelchair or his wealth. But now, everything felt tainted. She slumped into a chair, burying her face in her hands. What do I do? She whispered to herself, her heart aching. She loved James. There was no denying that. But the betrayal felt so deep. How could she marry someone who had kept such a huge secret from her? Meanwhile, back at the altar, James stood frozen, staring at the door Sarah had just walked through. The room was thick with stunned silence, the guests unsure of what to do. James's heart felt like it was breaking. He had hurt the woman he loved more than anything, and he knew it. His intention had never been to deceive her, not like this. He just wanted to find someone who would love him for who he truly was, not for his money or his appearance. But now, seeing the pain he had caused, James realized the price of his deception. He wanted to chase after her, to beg for her forgiveness, But he knew she needed space, so he waited, his heart pounding in his chest, praying that she would come back, that she would understand why he had done what he did. In the small room, Sarah wiped her tears away, forcing herself to breathe deeply. She thought about everything, about the man James was and the love they shared. Yes, he had lied, but their love had been real. The moments they spent together, the laughter, the conversations, the way he had always been there for her, all of that had been real. She had never cared about his wheelchair, and she had never cared about how much money he had. What she cared about was his heart. The realization washed over her slowly, like a soft wave bringing clarity to her stormy thoughts. She didn't love James because of what he looked like or how he lived. She loved him because he was kind, because he understood her in ways no one else did, because he had always seen her for who she really was. Even with all the lies, that truth was still there. Her heart ached with the weight of it all, but deep down, she knew the love she had for him hadn't changed. It wasn't about the wheelchair or the money. It was about James, the man who had shown her a kind of love she had never known before, a love that wasn't perfect, but real. Slowly, Sarah stood up, her heart still heavy, but steadier now. She needed to face James, to talk to him, to tell him how she felt. The anger and confusion hadn't completely disappeared, but they were no longer drowning her. She had to confront the man she loved, not to condemn him, but to understand him. Taking a deep breath, Sarah walked back into the church. The guests turned in their seats, their eyes following her every step, the tension palpable. But she wasn't thinking about them. Her gaze was locked on James, who stood at the altar, his face etched with guilt and hope. When she reached him, Sarah stopped, her heart pounding. She looked into his eyes, seeing the regret and love mirrored in his expression. "Why, James?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" James's throat tightened as he struggled to find the words. "I was scared, Sarah. I've been used and hurt by people who only wanted me for my money or for something else. I needed to know if someone could love me for who I really am. Just James. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to trust that this was real." Sarah's heart ached at his words. She understood now, even though it still hurt. He had been afraid, just like she had been afraid of the doubts people had placed in her mind. In his own way, James had been searching for the same thing she had, real love. "I wish you had trusted me," Sarah whispered, tears filling her eyes once more. "I loved you for who you were, James. I always have. But it's hard. It's hard to know what's real now." James stepped forward, his voice breaking. "What's real, Sarah, is my love for you. That has never changed. The man you fell in love with, the one who listens to you, who makes you laugh, who would do anything to make you happy. That's the real me. The rest of it, the lie, I'm so sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me." Sarah stared at him, her heart full of conflict, but also love. She had always believed in love, real love, and she had found it with James. The deception hurt, but the bond they shared was stronger than that. In that moment, she made her decision. "I love you, James," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "And I forgive you, but we have to rebuild the trust. We have to be honest with each other from now on." James's eyes filled with tears as he nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise, Sarah, no more secrets. I love you, and I'm ready to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Sarah reached out and took James's hand. The priest, sensing the shift, stepped forward once again to resume the ceremony. With tears in their eyes, Sarah and James exchanged vows, their voices trembling with the weight of everything they had been through. As they said their "I do's," it wasn't just words. It was a promise, a commitment to love each other, flaws and all. And as they sealed their vows with a kiss, the church erupted into applause. Their love had been tested, but it had endured, stronger, deeper, and more real than ever before. This was the beginning of their forever. If this story moved you as much as it moved us, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an emotional story like this one. And don't forget to comment below where you're watching from. We'd love to connect with you.